At the end of the day, I make stuff for me. If other people read it, that's awesome. I'm very happy for them too. But I think if you set your goals for just yourself of I want to create, then I don't know that you can really be disappointed, unless you don't deliver, I guess, for yourself.
Hello, welcome to Most Writers Are Fans, the show where we look behind the scenes at how creatives build their careers out and their passions one decision at a time. I'm your host, Terry Bartley. Today I'm talking to World Champion Teacher of the Year 2025, Cody Walker, a high school English teacher, poet, and indie author who's carved out a vibrant career right in the heart of his local community. Cody's works include gritty Peter Parker retelling Everland, the supernatural noir Welcome to Pinhook, its follow-up Down the Road and Back Again, and a whole catalog of personal projects ranging from Golden Girls-inspired poetry to comics written with his son. We're diving into his latest project, Olympia, Arkansas, a Hercules retelling set in the rural Midwest and using it as a jumping off point to talk about crowdfunding, building an audience through your community connections, and how creative ambition doesn't always mean leaving your day job behind. Let's get into it. So, Cody, how did you sort of get into crowdfunding? Because I've noticed you doing a ton of these sort of early on. What made you want to go that route?
My first campaign, I think, was 13 or 14 years ago now. It was our comic Noir City. I wanted to make a comic with a friend of mine, and neither of us were artists, and so we had to pay an artist. Obviously, we need to pay somebody to do the art and stuff, and then you have to print it, and then you have to ship it. And I think around when we were doing that, it was a little bit after the Sullivan Sluggers controversy, which I don't know if anybody remembers that now.
Go ahead and recap it a tad.
Yeah. So the short version of it is that Sullivan Sluggers made like $100,000, maybe more than that, on Kickstarter, and the person who ran the Kickstarter did not factor in international shipping. It's a huge oversight, but slightly forgivable, I suppose, just because it was a different time. So anyway, I remember being really, really worried at that time, which was funny because it's like our goal was $4,500 and it made $4,600. It's like we had the bare minimum of success, I suppose. But I was worried about having enough money to ship everything, and I didn't want to have to go in the hole for this sort of vanity project with a friend of mine. And so after I did that issue, a little bit later, we did a second issue with a different artist who is local. So it was someone that I knew instead of trading emails with someone from Canada that I didn't know. And then after that, we had talked about doing another Noir City for a bit. And then I decided I did not want to make comics. Oh, well, no, I take that back. I was going to do an Everland comic. So I wanted to do like a darker take on Peter Pan. And I thought to myself, oh, have four artists do an 8-page short story apiece. And it'll go faster because you have four people doing 8 pages. And I know all of them. So, that eliminates that sort of awkwardness of working with someone you don't know. And I was waiting on pages for such a long time for some people, and I was just like, "Screw it, I'm just gonna launch." And I launched, in December, which was the worst idea ever. No one has money for
Yeah, anything
Kickstarter in
extra.
December. Yeah, that's the worst idea. And so we launched it in December, and that's the only Kickstarter that I've ever done that failed. And I learned a lot from that. And I decided to never do comics again after, because I didn't want to have to rely upon artists. Obviously, I want to pay artists, but I realized that I was not ever making any money at all. And I also realized that I needed to recognize the strength of my own writing and recognize that I can tell a story without comic book visuals to go along with it. I can tell the stories that I want to tell without making them comics. So then I started writing books instead. And so I don't know how many Kickstarters I've done since then, at least 10. When Everland failed, I said, I still want to tell this story, but I want to do it in book form instead. And so I ended up writing my first Everland book, and making that a successful Kickstarter. And I've got 2 books published from that now, and I've got at least 4 more planned or 5 planned or 6 planned. So that's kind of where it started. It started from failure, I guess.
Yeah, I love that. And honestly, I think that's probably the thing that holds a lot of authors back from doing it is they're worried about sort of that failure. And I think it's good to know that that's not the end of the story. you know, if that happens, I kind of feel like for you, one of the reasons you were probably successful early on is that you had a bit of a platform already between RPPR and your blog, and then you as a teacher. How would you say that you've leveraged those audiences, and how would you say you went beyond that?
Yeah, I think it mostly comes from being a nice, likable person who says, "Can you please give me money for this book?" And people go, he's nice and likable. I suppose I will give him money for this book." There are times whenever I'm in the thick of a Kickstarter and I'm like, "Oh, I don't know if this is gonna make," and I'll post something, and you feel a little like you're panhandling a little bit there, and you get some pity donations or something like that, and you're just like, "Oh, I don't know how good I feel about this. I don't know. I think RPPR definitely helped me at the very start. I would say that I don't know that that is a well that I can draw from any longer, just because I haven't been on there in a while. But also I think too, it's like I've done so many projects that now I think I've got a good about 30 people that every time are going to donate. That are just guaranteed 30 donations guaranteed every time. And then I have some Patreon subscribers that are always kind of there for me, that back me every single month. I should give a shout out to them because they are so fantastic. Yeah, I have a friend named Amy. We met via wrestling Twitter. She latched on as a Patreon subscriber and backs everything that I do. Is nothing but supportive, feels like family. And I have another subscriber named Finch. She's been on this for a really long time too. Just those people that have stuck around with Patreon with me for since the beginning, and still stay to it. And so it's really nice to have those people that are in your corner.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's sort of the goal at the end of the day, right? Is to kind of try to build something that's actually sustainable and not just
Yeah.
a thing you do on the fly.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about Patreon, just because I think that is probably like an
Sure.
avenue a ton of people want to head into down the road. What made you kind of decide that it was time to do that? To try to give people a chance to support you over time, but then
Mhm.
also give you a venue that's more consistent than like a Kickstarter.
I think it boiled down to, well, I want a place that houses my writing that I don't have to pay for, that I could make money from. And so I was like, oh, Patreon is like, that's the answer, at
Yeah.
least very much at the time. I've tried to look into other services, and I just don't know that I don't know. It doesn't gel with me the way Patreon does. Like real true professional writers will be like, "Oh, you should be on everything. You should be on Substack, and you should be on Twitter still for some reason." But I don't feel like I have the time or the energy to devote to diversifying those avenues. I'm with Patreon. I make posts every couple of days. I really only have one reward level. It's $1. Hop in for $1 if you want to. If you want to give us more money, then please go ahead and give me more money, and that's fine. But
Do you feel like you have some sort of do you feel that pressure to kind of constantly produce things, or do you just sort of trust that your community is supporting you and that's what matters? Or you know what I'm saying?
uh, that's a great question, because that is something that I struggle with. Is I feel that pressure, and then my wife will tell me, "No one cares. You need to stop worrying about it."
Yeah.
Like there's no one sitting around worrying if you're going to post something. You
Yeah,
know,
refreshing your Patreon page to see if
Yeah.
you're gonna drop.
Yeah. Literally nobody there's no one is wasting their time, like, worrying that I'm gonna post something. Like, I think that takes the pressure off, but then I still will produce things regularly because I feel fulfilled whenever I have stuff up, you know? So it's evolved over time. It used to be I was gonna have like these really rigid, the first week of the month was going to be a project about teaching. The second would be an Everland book, an Everland chapter. The third would be something about parenting. And then the fourth would be something else. I don't remember exactly. And then as time went on, I was like, I don't really care about writing a teaching book. And, I've kind of told all the really great parenting stories that I love to tell. And it evolved into just doing Everland stuff. And then I was writing Golden Girls. I had my Golden Girls poems. I was doing those during the pandemic. Then I did a crime noir story that I was posting every month. And then Olympia last year, I did a chapter of Olympia every single month.
Well, let's talk a little bit about logistics of like Kickstarters and things. Do you sort of like set your goal at like the minimum you need, or do you try to shoot a little higher? Like, how do you balance that?
It's usually about the minimum that I need. So it's the minimum for paying a cover artist and paying Ross to edit the book and put it all together for me, and then printing and shipping. And then I add just a little bit more so that the next time around I'll have that money for any other little weird things that I don't know. So I usually aim for about 1500 every time. I've found if I try to do a little more than that, if I try to do about 2000, it can be a little bit more difficult and I get a little bit more stressed. And so I would rather just be 1500 to put the thing to bed pretty quickly and not worry about it again, you know. It used to be so much easier to raise this money because the algorithm would show your stuff. And now the algorithm, if it knows that you want money, will bury you so that you have to purchase ads. There'd have to be a lot more work compared to what I was doing, which is just, oh, here's a link, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But now it's so much harder than it used to be. And so now I'm going to make some silly memes. Hopefully I'll put it on my Insta stories and then I can see how many of you have seen it.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. So what do you feel like you've learned through the years? Like, do you feel like your early Kickstarters, like you've learned a lot that you've tried to include like those lessons now when you make one, or like what are some of those
Yeah.
lessons?
Yeah. So, I think those early Kickstarters, I would try to promise something that I was like, oh, I'll do that. I'll totally do that. And then I don't do it. Cause I think that there was something in the Noir City ones. I was like, oh, I'll run like a one shot that's set in the Noir City world. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. Like that's the thing I've learned is really only deliver the things that you're going to deliver. So I always add like hey, I'll write you a poem based on anything that you want because I like doing that. And that's
Yeah.
it's kind of a fun personal thing that between you and me. And it's just a nice creative exercise for me. And what's a way that I can still generate content and you've given me money to generate more content? So it's like, okay, if you want me to write a poem about mashed potatoes, could I put that in a poetry collection later on? If it's good enough and I liked it enough and so that's something I've learned is make sure you deliver everything and make sure that everything you do will generate content for something else.
I think that's a good tip for like living life these days. If you want to be
Yeah.
creative,
Yeah.
be aware of those areas of your life that you could turn into content. But also, this is a whole
Yeah.
other thing, but don't let your entire life be content also, right?
No. Yeah, I
That's
know.
another thing
I
we
know.
have to also be aware of. Yeah, so I think I wanted to chat with you about too, because I think that this is sort of interesting for people, because I think that it's a bit of a different frame than I would usually do on this show, which is that a lot of conversation with you and kind of like when I've dug into kind of like your goals, what you see long term, that kind of thing. I never get the sense that like your goal is to become like an author and that is who you are. That's all you are. Like that's not what I get from you. I feel, but with that said, like earlier in the podcast, you said like I have books planned out like into the future, and that's an author, right? Like that's like objectively you are an author. Like that just is true. How do you think about like balancing kind of like having a full time job that is sort of like more of? I think that you would argue you identify more as a teacher than you do an author. So like, how do you feel like balancing that, but then also having this creative outlet that is like part of also who you are?
Well, I think it's a little bit of a complicated answer. I think there was a time when I was viewing writing as okay, this is definitely a creative outlet. It's a great place for me to kind of bare my soul and to process my feelings on political, social, economic ideas, but wrap it up in a story and stuff, and I would always find a thing to punch at that I wanted to punch at. And so that's where almost all of my writing came from. And then I also saw it as I could probably make a little bit of money at this. Like I'll make enough money to buy like a
Yeah.
little thing for myself, a little gadget or something, and be happy with that. And then I started adjuncting in addition to full-time teaching. And so all of that is eating up all of my time. And there's that other part of me too that goes, okay, well, I'm making really good money adjuncting. So I go, I don't know, like that's sapping all of the time that I would use for creative things, because I'm busy grading online or I'm posting
Yeah.
stuff. And I got through Olympia last year, which was really good. And then I took on like this third teaching job that I had, or I guess technically fourth if you're ignoring my full-time actual job that I have. And that really like totally sapped completely any time. I wasn't reading, I wasn't playing games. It's grading or making videos and that's it. And so it's tough to kind of step away from creative stuff because you're doing all of these other things. But I do know that like my philosophy of writing has always been this. My grandpa was one of the greatest craftsmen that I've ever known. He was amazing. And oftentimes he did all of that stuff for free. If he wanted to, he could have easily mass produced a bunch of little things and taken it to craft shows and sell it and stuff like that. And instead, he would just make stuff and give it to people. And for him, the art of creation was the important part. And all of the money and stuff like that is so far, it's not even second, it's like fourth or fifth. And so that's kind of how I view whenever I do a creative thing is that I'm doing it because I like this making of something. But if I don't make money at it, like real money at it, I don't really care about that. I just wanted to make this thing. I had this story that I wanted to get out. I had these things that I thought would make somebody laugh that I wanted to put into a book, and that was enough for me. Let me tell you the most fulfilling moment ever is Duncan and I were selling comics at a bookstore and we were doing a signing and he and I were sitting there and nobody was showing up to this. Like it was a Saturday at 2 in the afternoon and I was like, I'll just read this book to you. He's like, okay. And so I'm reading it to him and he is full force crying because he thinks it's so funny. And it was at that moment that I was like, wow, that was a completely fulfilling moment. I
Yeah.
made I made my kid cry. He was laughing so hard. And I don't care if anybody else reads this. We shared this moment together and it was great. And then the second really fulfilling moment is my dad read Patchwork, which is my book about Frankenstein people being manufactured and stuff. And my dad never compliments my writing. And it's not that my dad is withholding with like praise. He's not like that. It's just like, but my dad who got me into comic books and all this other stuff, he read Patchwork and he goes, that's the best thing you've ever written. I was like, yeah, oh my God, that's amazing that you like that because this is a very politically charged book and is very, very anti-Republican. And so it's nice that you enjoyed this. And my dad is also pretty deeply religious. And so I handed him my Lose Your Own Paradise where you play as the devil. And I said, I go, read that and tell me what you think. And so I waited like a couple weeks and I was like, did you read it? And he's like, yeah, it was good. Anyway, and I'm like, you didn't read it at all. If you would have, you would have recognized that it's not blasphemy at all. It is high satire that really the right path is the biblical path to choose to in order to win the book or I don't know. And so I was like, oh well, it's fine, you're never going to read it. And
Yeah,
but
I think that's a good reminder because I think that a lot of times we crave the like affirmation from like strangers, right? Like that's
uh
sort of like the thing about being a creative is you really want people that you have never met to be like, "Hey, this thing I enjoyed." But it does mean a lot whenever people in your
yeah,
life, especially because frankly, I think for a lot of us, people in our lives don't consumer art. It's
No.
mostly strangers who do. So
Yes.
whatever they do, like, it means a lot. So I think that is something to keep in mind. That if you can't
Yeah.
get somebody that you love to read your thing, it's probably going to mean a lot more to you
Yeah.
than what like a Goodreads 5-star review would mean to you.
Yeah, definitely. And like I think about too, like going back to the idea of being a professional writer and stuff. I was talking to a friend of mine who was like, "Oh, I've made this indie comic book and stuff, and the end goal, of course, is eventually get hired somewhere and write comics and stuff." And I go, "Why?" Well, so you could contribute to the DC or Marvel pantheons. I go, "Why? And why do you want to do that? So that nerds on the internet can talk about how terrible it was? Like they're not going to like what you write." Okay? And I'm not saying that you're a bad writer. I'm saying that no matter what you write, they're not going to like it. People don't like Grant Morrison's Batman. There's people who don't like Alan Moore, but there's people that you take the greatest writers and artists of all time, and some average person's going to go, "That was okay." So I just think, I don't really care about trying to create something that a lot of people will see. I don't really care about writing a major superhero or something like that. Now, obviously, if anybody asked me to, I would immediately say yes.
Yeah, like
But
if you just
there's
got approached on the street to be like, "Hey, would you want to write
yeah,
Superman?"
that's never going to happen because I have no goals for it. I'm not searching for an agent to help me for it. At the end of the day, I make stuff for me. If other people read it, that's awesome. I'm very happy for them to. But I think if you set your goals for just yourself of I want to create, then I don't know that you can really be disappointed, unless you don't deliver, I guess, for yourself.
Hey guys, if you enjoy hearing me talk about writing, you might like to read the things I actually write. My first book is called Tyranny of the Fae. It's 3 novellas starring 3 very different women. You can find the link in the show notes. So I'm curious if you have any of these stories, because I had one this past year as a author/teacher, where a new girl transferred in, and she was in one of my elective classes, so like I didn't really have her as a regular English class. But she was like, "Hey, did you write Tyranny of the Fae?" And I was like, "Yes." And then she was like, "Oh, it was really good." And I was like, I didn't know how to respond at the moment because it's like somebody that I teach read my stuff. That's wild.
Yeah. I would say earlier in my career, students were interested when they found out that I was a writer and they would want to read what I've written. And so I've had students borrow Everland before and come back and just, "Oh, that was so good. I loved that. That was so cool. I love this thing," you know? And I always just respond with "Oh, thank you." I did have one kid write a fan fiction of one of my characters. And I was like, "I'm not gonna read that. I'm sorry." Like, I am really sorry. I can't, no offense to him at all, but it's like I have a very specific way of how I view the babies in my head, that
Yeah.
like I can't, anybody else trying to touch that ain't, I don't know that I can do that.
And I feel like the student teacher relationship is such a weird thing to sort of like explain to people because it's not like being friends with somebody in life, and it's not like
No.
being like a mentor to somebody in life either. It's like a very specific relationship where it's like once I leave the school building, once I'm no longer part of this person's life, like I kind of want to divorce myself of it. Once they graduate or whatever, we can decide what our lives look like after that. But like until then, like you're part of my job and I kind of need you to be that. And
Yeah.
it is kind of a hard thing to like balance, especially when you do creative stuff also where people can access you, other ways.
I mean, I'm going into year 18 for me for teaching. And, I'm at a point where I think about there are more students than I have forgotten than I stay in touch with. The sheer volume of amount of students that I've had at this point in my career. You have those special moments with them for the couple years that you're with them. And then when they're gone, they don't forget about you, but they forget about you, like, and that does not bother me at all. Like that doesn't hurt my feelings. But it is interesting to think about that there's students that I was really close with, whenever I first started teaching, and I go, "Oh, like, we'll stay in touch and stuff. And I might get a meme every couple of months, but then I never. You're not going to hear from them. I had there was one graduating class, it was the class of 2021. It was very rare for me. We had issues at my school, and I was basically boiled down. I taught them their entire high school career. I taught them freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, and that was a fluke. I've not done that since. I just had this one class for 4 years, and there are kids from that I still talk to. That's so rare that those connections are so strong and that they're still there.
Yeah, I get that
Yeah,
too because I'm going into my 5th year, so like I'm still a new teacher, right, comparatively. But the class that graduated not last year, but the year before, I taught them my first year as a teacher when they were in 10th grade. Then I taught them as seniors. That class will always be kind of special to me, just because, like like I carried quite a bit of their high school English career with them, but then also like they were there when I first started.
yeah, right. I've wanted to put this in poem form, and I can't quite do it yet. I haven't quite figured out how to do it, but I wanted to write a poem about how the Doctor from Doctor Who is so the connections he makes with people are so special and things, but he's gonna forget about you. And you're gonna forget about him too. You'll remember, there was those moments that we went and faced the Daleks and stuff, and that was a scary time, but I do have bills to pay now.
Yeah,
And
it's a chapter in my life that I'll carry with me, but
yeah.
that's what it was.
Yeah, but now I have a child who, doesn't eat vegetables, and now I'm worried about that. And
Yeah.
there's a leak underneath the shower, and I got to pay for that now. And
Well, and those
so,
are stories I think worth telling too, right?
yeah,
Like those
yeah,
would be interesting fiction, and I think that is something that
yeah,
is worth thinking about as a storyteller. So
yeah.
speaking of storytelling, any final tips you would give to any authors thinking about taking the jump into crowdfunding? Like anything, any advice, any last minute?
I would say the best advice I can give is first, make sure that your project is complete before time. Make sure that it is completely done and ready to go out before anything else. It can be exciting to want to do a Kickstarter and to build something, but if you are not finished beforehand, it's doomed to fail in the first place. Make sure that is a project that you truly, truly love, that you are very excited about, that you can walk away being proud of. Make sure that you pay anybody that is going to help you. Make sure you have the money ahead of time to pay for a cover artist, to pay an editor if you want, and assume you will make no money on it. Don't go into it thinking that you are going to make money, because you probably aren't. If you're doing it for the love of the art, then you're doing it for the right reasons, and that's why I do it still.
So, one final question. I've been doing this as like a final segment in this
Sure.
podcast in this new format. What have you been a fan of lately? Like, what kind of things would you want to share that you've been a fan of
Oh,
lately that you think?
yeah. Boy, you're gonna be surprised by this one probably. I have been reading Lore Olympus. Uh, I know that I'm really far behind because the series has ended, and I know it's silly for me to be waiting for them in book form because they are webtoons, but I don't like to read things on my phone at all. And so I have been plowing through Lore Olympus, and I fully recognize there's times where I'm like, I am not the audience for this. There is a lot of pining in it that is not for me, but I still love it. There's so many things that I love about it. The art is fantastic. The characters are so spot on. Like, she totally understands their voice and stuff like that. It's Rachel Smith, but I've been reading that. I also have been reading Vampire Hunter D books, which again, like, books from the even
Really,
more
really
after the
fresh. Yeah.
fact. Yeah, yeah, right. These books from the 80s, but I've been digging those. And let's go even farther back, and I've been reading Michael Moorcock's Elric books. They're fast. I've been trying to prepare my brain to write fantasy again. And so I've been
Yeah.
trying to read, that's where the Vampire Hunter D and Elric stuff is. Lore Olympus is just because I enjoy it.
So for me, the thing that I wanted to highlight because I'm sure nobody else has seen this. It's so obscure. James Gunn made a movie called Superman that
There's
came
a new
out.
Superman?
You've taken Duncan to it, I'm sure, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I've
feel
never
like you
heard.
had
Did they bring Henry Cavill back?
to.
I did something new this year. I actually spoke at a few different libraries and talked about making comics with kids and stuff like that at them. And I had the best time. That was so much fun. It scratched that itch of wanting to go back to teaching before summer's over.
Yeah.
So it was good. But we went and saw Superman before that, and I loved it. Almost every bit of it. I only have one minor complaint because we all have to pick apart art in every way possible.
I
Yeah.
wanted to, I was curious about your take because I know you're such a
Yeah.
big Superman guy. Like
Yeah.
Superman's like your hero, right? So
I have more embraced my Batman side in the past few years, but I love Superman. I have to love them almost equally, I would say. I feel like I'm very protective of Superman stuff. I was talking with a friend of mine and we were both like, it's so easy to get right, and yet it's almost never gotten right.
yeah.
I would say Superman, the animated series, got it right. I would say My Adventures with Superman gets it more right than the than the animated series. It's such a different take on him being a little more anime and twee and stuff like that, but I adore every second of it. He's so likable and fun. And I went into this having really high hopes, and it met all of them. I was totally fine with almost everything. So,
Yeah, I'm sure you know me well enough to know that I was just excited to see
yeah.
like Mr. Terrific on the big
Yes.
screen
Yep.
because like
Yep.
how wild to see these really obscure characters. Metamorpho.
Yep. Yep.
like
Yep.
those are the things that really like made me really happy. And then like Lois Lane
Yes.
was a real character that had
Yep.
agency. Like that was nice to see.
Oh my gosh, she didn't need saving, and she solved the major problem kind of herself, or with the help of the Daily Planet.
Jimmy Olsen was
Yeah.
relevant to plot. That never happened
Loved
in a Superman movie.
loved Jimmy Olsen. Jimmy Olsen was great. He couldn't have been better. I love everyone in it except for Ma Kent.
yeah.
Ma Kent, I live in Missouri. Been to Kansas plenty of times. I've talked to many of people from Kansas, and there's not a single person who talks like Ma Kent.
Well, James Gunn clearly leaned real hard on the folksiness
Yeah.
of, of Mon
Yeah.
Pocket.
There's that part of me though that's like, have you met anybody from the Midwest? Like, this is not that's about the only thing that I had any problem with. I thought Pa Kent was great. Which I don't know that actor's name, but I've seen him in like a thousand things. But yeah, he was pretty fantastic. I thought that we had probably the best Superman that we've had since Christopher Reeve. Yeah. It's funny too because, like, my parents don't read any comics at this point anymore, and my dad loved it. He really enjoyed it a lot. And even people who know nothing at all beyond just sort of the basics, they all enjoyed it too. And so,
Well, and I think that that's why when you adapt a good story from comics, it's gonna be a good movie that everyone likes. Like that's ultimately like, and the thing that I super hate, and I think you'll be with me on this, is like so people get so caught up on like details. Details are so irrelevant because what matters is like the spirit of the character. And like this movie so accurately captured the spirit of Superman, and I walked away like feeling more hopeful, which like these days is hard.
yeah, it's all fine. Everything is. So I was watching. I'm a little ashamed of saying this, and I'm very sorry. But I watched the 2021 Mortal Kombat last night because I had not seen it, and my kids were out of town, and so I was like, okay, let's watch something, really violent and stupid. And I could not finish it, and I can finish pretty much anything. And as I was watching it, I actually marveled at how well James Gunn introduced so many different characters in
yeah,
in a movie. He doesn't talk down to his audience. If there is exposition, it's always handled so easily rather than my name's Mr. Terrific and I
right.
have these, spheres that do this, and my wife noted, she was like, I was really proud of him for not resorting to the easy joke of about Mr. Terrific's terrific balls. It's like he treated the material with respect that it deserves, and did not try to say this is goofy. Isn't this so silly and dumb, that we're doing this? Like, there's a few moments, that he can't help himself by undercutting something with a joke or whatever, and you just, okay, whatever. I'll let you have these indulgences. it's not Taika Waititi levels of let's completely destroy the emotional impact that this has, But yeah, no, I dug it a lot. I thought it was a really, really good movie. I want so much more. I'm ready for so much more. So seeing a movie that I thoroughly enjoyed and liked all the characters was a nice surprise. It was a nice change.
Well, and two, like, people complain about Marvel movies now because they're like, it's so much homework. And
Uh-huh.
it's like, there were a ton of characters in here that probably most people that watched it didn't know.
No.
But
Yeah.
the movie didn't like stop and explain who they were, like you said. But like people, there was enough context that people could get the gist of who these characters are. And,
Yeah.
and I think that we need to start giving people credit for that too, because like, we didn't need a full series to know who Kamala Khan is, right?
Yeah.
Like she's
Right.
pretty, you get the sense of who she is out the gate.
Yeah, you can figure it out real fast. Yeah. Well, and it's like, again, going back to Mortal Kombat, which is so absurd to deal with right now, is
There is
that
a sequel coming out soon, so it's timely.
that movie is funny because they could have just as easily made a movie where they're doing martial arts and they happen to have powers and they do those powers. And you don't have to explain it. It's just somebody throws a fireball because they can throw a fireball and that's just the
Yeah.
world that we live in, okay? But they go out of their way for a really long time to explain that they all have these tattoos and there are called arcana marks, and those arcana marks will reveal themselves sort of like puberty with powers and stuff like that. And I was like, that's the movie that we're watching
Well,
right
and
now.
that's like how an annoying nerd would explain like Hush to somebody, right? Like,
Yeah.
like you don't need to read a Wikipedia article about Hush to understand
Yeah.
it. Like that's not the point of it.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, think about Guy Gardner, is that Guy Gardner's introduced this movie and they could have easily taken a long time to go into some, the Green Lantern rules of,
And there's a show
his.
coming up, so like there's incentive for
Yeah.
them to do it if they would have.
Yeah. And instead it was just like, oh, I've been employed by the Guardians of the Universe to protect this planet.
Yeah,
That's it. And
and
I
that's
don't need
enough.
more. We don't need more.
Yeah,
What more do you need? He's a guy that makes stuff with a ring. That's,
yeah,
and we should have known that he can handle that well because Guardians handles that so well.
yeah.
He handles ensemble casts, I think, better than almost anybody. There was no need to worry about that going in, I don't think.
Well, thanks so much for stopping by, Cody. It felt good to hang out again. This because I
Yeah.
feel like our conversations start as like informative and then turn into hangouts towards the end. And I
Yeah,
appreciate
definitely.
the chance to have a bit of a hangout. So,
Yeah. No, as two people that are teachers on summer break, who probably don't see a whole lot of adults
yeah,
on a day-to-day basis, it's nice to talk to somebody. I also find that there's so few people that can keep up with me. That
yeah.
in my general day-to-day life sphere of things, that when I get to talk to somebody that can keep up with me, I cherish it because then I don't have to slow down. you know.
Yeah, it's hard to explain to people that like there's like normies and there's people like us, and I don't even know how to define people like us, but it's
Yeah.
different than everyone else.
Yeah, and it's like we've read so much and we know so many things, but we're also not the kind of people who like fan cast, or
Yeah,
we're like, let me pick apart every single thing of every frame of this thing that's happened. It's just like
yeah,
we read to enjoy, we keep it in our heads. It's for callbacks later on, and then talk about it with someone else. And that's it.
yeah. All right. Well, if people want to find you, where could they go to do that? Like online?
Oh, patreon.com/popgun chaos. That's the place to find me. You can also go to my Instagram, which is also popgun chaos. And that's kind of the places where I am to see my stuff. So
All
yeah.
right. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
If you're enjoying Most Writers Are Fans, please like, subscribe, follow on all the different things. Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, all those places is the best way to spread our show. Talk to you soon. Most Writers Are Fans is a Starlight King production. This episode was edited by Gabriel Gould. You can watch video episodes on YouTube and Spotify, and subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you never miss a new conversation about the craft of storytelling. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review the show. It really helps us reach more writers and readers like you. To leave a comment, send a message, or even record a voice message, visit mostwritersaretfans.com or email us anytime at press@starlightkingpress.com. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, don't be afraid to tell your story.